time, we'd like to welcome to the show Tony Willis. And a few weeks ago, Tony, maybe even a month ago, Tony and I exchanged a few emails about Home Assistant. And Braden and I have talked about that over the years, but we've never really been able to do anything with it simply because once you've got your house set up for some sort of home automation, it's really hard to switch. Like when I moved over from Insteon to HomeKit, it took me a while to do it, and it did cost a little bit of money. So it's great to have Tony on, who's going to share with us his experiences with Home Assistant. So Tony, thanks so much for being with us. And first of all, where did you start your home automation journey, and what led you to Home Assistant?
Okay, so I got interested in home automation. Saw some things here and there, probably about 5 years ago or so, and then really I heard a lot on your guys' show, and really got interested in it, but didn't know if I'd be able to, the pricing on it and stuff, get the finance committee to approve of it. And then she said she wanted a alarm on the barn door because we have horses. So she wanted an alarm on the barn door, and I was like, "Here's my end. I can really."
It's always something.
Yeah. So instead of going ADT or something, obviously I wanted to do it myself, and I was like, "Well, I can start with this." I tried Z-Wave, but we have it's out in the barn. I couldn't get a signal out there, and I heard you guys talk about Insteon, so I got into Insteon because it has the power line network, so I can get the power line out because we got electric out there. I can get the power line out there, and then I was just using a regular Insteon hub, and then I found that was a little limited, and then so I came across the Universal Devices ISY 994, and I really liked that. Got a lot going with that. I actually even got like a Z-Wave radio that you could put in there, and got some Z-Wave stuff because I wanted to get door locks and stuff, and I got a lot with that, and then kind of got everything I wanted set up as far as I could with that. And then on another podcast, I heard them talking about Home Assistant, and they didn't get too deep into it, so I started looking into it, and then I was like, okay, this is really cool. I started tinkering with it a little bit, trying to do like some home bridge stuff, and got stalled off on that, and then I let it sit for about a month, and then I'm gonna try that again, and really got into it, and didn't do any of the home bridge stuff, just kind of did it on myself, for myself, and not for my wife so much, and just kind of because I could have the ISY still doing the normal automation stuff that we had, and then on the side I could do the Home Assistant because the Home Assistant links to the ISY, and pulled in all the switches and locks and everything that I had. And so I used the app on my phone. It was tinkering with it, and then slowly started doing some automations with, for me, and then slowly started moving all my programs from the ISY over to Home Assistant, and really liked what I could do with it. And then finally, I ended up pulling the trigger and got her on the Home Assistant app, and I'd been using it for a while, and I got all of my automations basically pulled into Home Assistant from the ISY, and basically the ISY only acts as my Insteon bridge. It just talks to my Insteon devices. Then I've got now a Z-Wave and a Zigbee radio in my Home Assistant that it natively talks to my Z-Wave stuff, and then for my Insteon, Home Assistant talks to the ISY that talks to the Insteon stuff.
What are you running the Home Assistant platform on?
So I have a little a mini computer. I think Intel was pushing them 5 or 6 years ago. I bought this little mini computer. They were when the NUCs for NUCs first came out, and they were doing these little mini computers. I just had it sitting around. I was actually using it I bought it for a to hook up to the TV, to use an app called MB, which is like a media server application. And so I was using it for that, and it had just been sitting around, so I kind of gave up on it. It had just been sitting around. So I put it on that, and it works pretty well. It's pretty low power. It doesn't have a monitor on it or keyboard or anything. Just sits on top of my networking hardware and does its thing.
Can you run it on, say, like a Raspberry Pi or other devices?
Yeah, that's actually the main, the preferred way to run it. That you can do it all kinds of different ways. I initially started out, I had Linux like Linux Mint on that little mini computer, and I was doing it in a Docker container, and then I actually I borked my setup when I was trying to do something, and so I had to start all over again, which was that was tough. I was pretty upset when I messed that up because I'd been running it for about 6 months, and like I put a lot of thought into, like, as you do when you're doing home automation, like how your house runs, the different things that you can do, and I thought I was pretty upset about that, but I got it going again pretty easy, and now it's they have a native operating system that they maintain, that you have to, like, you flash onto the hard drive or whatever, and so that's what I'm doing there. And they also have a
So
little it's called Home Assistant Blue, that you can buy. It's like a little box that you can buy that runs on your network that has the operating system on it.
okay, so they've got it down to where you could just buy something that's already pre-installed, and then you can start building out from that. Now,
Yep.
would you say Home Assistant is a little bit more complex? Because I had Insteon, and to make it work, I had to buy some sort of control software. And so I did have something from a company called Perceptive Automation, and it was really powerful. But the control software is where all the smarts were. And once you learned how that worked, you can set up scripts and the macros and that kind of thing. It's a little bit more difficult than, say, HomeKit or Google Home or something along those lines, but it's way more powerful. How would you rate Home Assistant in that category? Is it something that just anybody can do, or do you need to have a little bit of technical savvy to be able to do it?
You definitely need a little bit of technical savvy to be able to do it. I'm not sure about those things that you can buy, because definitely the hardest part is getting it up and running, like the operating system and the software itself. But then once it's up and running, adding devices and stuff like that's not too bad. It's definitely not as easy as like Google Assistant or HomeKit, but it's definitely getting easier. They're like, I think I actually, when I was first started on Z-Wave, I think I came across it when it was strictly you had to do YAML files and there was no GUI to it whatsoever. But they're moving a bunch of stuff over to GUI. Like they just had a big update not too long ago where they pulled in a bunch of stuff that was only YAML files that you can do in the GUI now. But setting it up, it's definitely very, very powerful. It's a big blank slate, but there's a lot of basic stuff that you can do in the GUI. Like you can set up, like, if this happens, then turn on this light or whatever. So that you can do all in the GUI. That's pretty self-explanatory. But then you can also really dig into the files. Like I've done some stuff. They have these things called templates where you can do, like, different times of days, and it's even above my head. So
Yeah, got it. So there's a lot of power there. Now,
yeah.
you mentioned Z-Wave and Insteon. Are those supported through some sort of bridge? And if so, what other bridges are available to the users of Home Assistant?
Okay, so Z-Wave, I just bought like a little Z-Wave USB stick. It also has a Zigbee radio in it, and that's native. There's lots of different ways you can go about it. Like I said, they have one that's native that's not quite as powerful. The one that I use is called Z-Wave 2 MQTT, and it's like a separate software that runs on the side that directly talks with Home Assistant, and it integrates really nicely. But then they also have one that integrates better, but is not the preferred way. But it's hard to explain. I didn't get into it, so I don't know a lot about it. But then like Insteon, they do have a custom integration, but it doesn't support the like my Siren and my 6 and 8 button keypads. So I use the ISY for that. And then the Zigbee is native. So there's different ways you can go about it. They can also, like, if you have like a Samsung smart things that does like Zigbee and Z-Wave, I think it can talk to that hub as well. So there's lots of different ways you can go about it.
So it's actually quite impressive being able to tie all these different products together through this Home Assistant. And you mentioned Homebridge a little earlier. I was using Homebridge, and I still am. I have something on Raspberry Pi that allows me to use devices that are not supported by HomeKit in there. And I'm assuming it's the same sort of thing with Homebridge, where there's plugins or interfaces that are written to run that just talks to the other devices. And so you sent us some videos, and I will have a video of this on our YouTube channel. There's one where you had the 6-button interface that you were just talking about, and you're able to use that to open and close the garage door. And I think you had a couple other things. Was it your
Yes.
chicken coop or something?
Yeah. I do have the chicken coop out there, but also the buttons are for I use like different lights. So like I try to make the lights where you can turn on and off different lights as many places as you would possibly want to. And that one I showed that because like the keypads are Insteon, but also it can control Z-Wave devices. So like I'll hit one of the buttons that's an Insteon command, and then Home Assistant translates that to a Z-Wave and turns off on and off Z-Wave lights. And my garage door controller is Z-Wave, so like from the user interface, you can't tell that they're two different protocols, and like normally they wouldn't be able to talk to each other, but Home Assistant makes that possible.
Now, speaking of your garage door, you've sent me a video of you driving up to the house and the garage, and it just opens. There's no audio, so I'm going to assume it just sensed that you were getting close and it opened, or did you hit a button to make that happen?
Nope, that was automatic. So the mobile app is another big draw for me, because that has different sensors. It pulls from your phone, so it gets your GPS location. You set where your home is on a map, and then you can set how far you want, what range. Like I think mine's like 200 meters or something like that. You set how far you want your circle to be, and then once you hit that geo fence, it says that you're home. And then so I have it set like when either me or my wife get home, it'll open the garage door. If it's dark out, it'll turn on the driveway spotlight as well. And when we leave, if one of us leaves, it'll close the garage door. If we both leave, it locks the doors, turns off all the lights, that basic home automation stuff. But the chicken coop one, that one's pretty cool. I have it so in the wintertime, chickens don't lay eggs, and it's because of the amount of light that they get. So I have it set where it'll fade their lights on 14 hours before sunset while they're still in their coop, so they get enough light and still lay eggs in the wintertime.
Ah, very cool. And I noticed, speaking of your chicken coop, you have some notifications telling you that either the door's open or something like that. You can create your own notifications, which I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah.
I think one of them was something like, the dryer has stopped running, but I don't know if the clothes are dry, that kind of stuff. So it's pretty interesting. You have a lot more customization in that regard.
Yeah, the notifications, they're blank slates, which can make it a little intimidating to do the notifications, but also allows you to do some cool stuff. So like I set it up, while I have some downtime at work or something, and then my wife sees them. I send her these little, little ribs to her, whatever, saying that like, hey, can use an open close sensor. Maybe I could buy one on Amazon if I could help do this.
That's hilarious. You could send subliminal messages to your wife through the notifications.
Yeah. So I even set up like some reminders for her, take medicine or like water the plants in the greenhouse. And it'll keep nagging her. It's a actionable notification. And she can say, yes, I've done it, or no, I haven't. And if she says, no, I haven't, it'll remind her again in another hour or however long I set. So that's cool.
Very
too.
Cool.
That's a little bit of a hack, but
yeah, and I'm sure she appreciates the cleverness of your reminders. So then the other thing I noticed is you have some really advanced energy monitoring. I have a few devices in my system that'll tell me how much energy I've used and if there is energy currently being drawn, but yours kind of goes 10 levels above that. So what do you use it for, and has it helped you save money?
Yeah, so I would first of all, no, it hasn't really helped me save money. But I mostly got it because we were looking into getting some solar panels, and I'm currently working on installing those now. So we were kind of like wondering, monitoring what uses how much power and stuff. But I came across two different devices that integrate with Home Assistant. One of them is called an iota watt, and I don't know if it's a Raspberry Pi based, but it's definitely much more approachable. It already has the software on there and everything. It's just a box that goes on your Wi-Fi, and then it's got 14 3.5 millimeter jacks, and you can plug in a CT clamp, which I've got one right up here. It just clamps on the hot wire of your any circuits that you have. Like I've opened up the breaker box and put them on different things. And the other one is called, it's from a company called, or it's not really a company, it's a person who does them. It's called Circuit Setup. And it's a similar thing. It's just a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack things with CT clamps. And then that takes a lot of like configuration because you got to tune them and stuff. That one's a little more complicated. But that's actually how I do my notifications for the washer and dryer is I just put those CT clamps and I monitor when it starts drawing power, and then it monitors it until it stops again, and then it says, oh, the dryer's off or the washer's off.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, I was running my dryer through one of those switches that I was telling you about, and it would let you know whether it was drawing power or not, but it didn't work very well. And so what I am thinking I'm going to do is I have an ability to create a virtual switch.
Mm-hmm.
So I can create that switch that when it starts drawing power, I can set that switch to say the dryer is on. And then when the power is done, I can also toggle it off. So I may do something like that because actually going to the device wasn't very helpful for me. Might as well just go downstairs and see if the thing is on. But looking at just an indication on the home screen, that makes it a lot easier. Yeah. Now, you mentioned configuration. How hard was it to configure the setup so you can get access outside your house to configure, just the configuration of getting your home assistant up?
Okay, that one, it was a little complicated, but not too bad. Getting it, once you get it installed, it actually does a really good job of onboarding stuff. Like when you first get it installed and you pull it up, it's it scans your network and says, hey, I know what this, and this is. And then we have integrations for it. And you can decide if you want to add the integration or not. Like it automatically picked up my ISY. And then I go to set it up, just put in the username and password. And then it says, here's the devices that are on here. Which ones do you want to add? And then it like picked up a printer. It picked up, it also has integrations for like the Roku and your, if your receiver and TV is on your network, it'll pull those in. I haven't done a lot of stuff with that really, because it kind of seemed like it drops in and out, and I just never got around to it. But so that kind of stuff, the onboarding of those is pretty cool and easy, not too bad. And then once you get all your devices in, it sets it up. They've got like their names. It's called their entities. So there's entities. So like each device can have multiple entities. And so then like you look at it shows all your entities and devices and stuff. And the configuration for that is getting basic stuff done is pretty easy. So you go into like your automations, and it has a list of all your devices for triggers. If like, trigger an automation when this device comes on. Sorry,
okay, so
a little bit there.
No, but it's similar to a lot of the other other home automation platforms. Once a device is there, when you want to set quote unquote an automation, it asks you, is it based on a time of day? Is it based on a sensor, or is it on a switch or device turning on or off? And then so there's a lot of that basic capability. And I think once you've got your stuff in there, then it's a lot easier. Now, when you add a new device, does it automatically sense that a new device has been added to your network?
It depends on how you go about it. I mean, like if I had a new Z-Wave device, like I go into that secondary software and add it, and then it automatically typically populates over to Home Assistant. I haven't added any new Insteon stuff on the ISY for a while, so I'm not sure about that. But I think it does typically pop up automatically.
Yeah, so if it's showing up on the ISY, then somehow it'll show up. That's what happens when I add a device on Homebridge. Once a device is added to Homebridge, the HomeKit says, okay, there's this device. It usually puts it in a default room or something, and then you need to go in there and tweak with it.
Yeah,
so last question, what are some pitfalls that you ran into, and then recommendations for anyone who wants to get into it?
So pitfalls that I had, the big one, like I said, where I borked my whole setup. I thought I knew what I was doing and um, got it over my head a little bit. Uh, that was just the biggest one, and
So is
some.
there a backup? Is there a backup
Yeah,
mechanism where
it
you
wasn't
can?
too bad.
Yeah.
So there is a backup utility that you have in there, and then luckily what I had done was I knew that I was maybe getting in a little over my head, so I had pulled. You can actually see the files that lists like um the uh the YAML file that has the program for all your automations, and I actually backed all those up on my computer. So like restoring it wasn't too bad. I just went through and just like basically copy and pasted a bunch of stuff over. So that was like not too bad, but it was definitely like my first thought when it was not working. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to spend days trying to get this thing back going. And it did take me a little while, but it wasn't too bad. But some recommendations for people is just try to figure out a way where you can, at least for me, it worked out well, where I had it on the side where my current setup still operated just fine while I was still tinkering with it on the side until I was like got more comfortable with it. And then just uh, has a steep learning curve. Be patient with it and read the documentation. Like it has really, really good online documentation. Um, that explains everything. And it has links to all of it. Like, as you're looking at, the instructions for one, um, how to do one thing, and it references something else, like it'll have a link to the directions for that page. It's just got fantastic documentation. That has been the lifesaver of it, really. Um, is I've done it all with just the online documentation. I very rarely have to dip into the forums and yeah,
Our recommendation is always start with one device. So get the maybe get a Raspberry Pi version that's already been pre-loaded. Get that
yeah,
plugged into your network, and then just have one light switch that you can turn on and off, and automate that, and then add
yep,
another one. The problem I see a lot of times, people will get overwhelmed. They'll just go buy 20 light switches and all this
yeah.
stuff, and it's just hard to do. But if you gradually build up, as you're making your mistakes on one item, it'll help you kind of bridge the gap. Because I
Yeah,
know in
that's
this
good
house, if I
too.
needed to start over, it would be a pain. But adding one device is very easy to
I
do.
had the benefit of already having like a setup, so I like that's why I started my whole home automation journey was just a few devices. I bought literally just enough to get that door sensor on the barn, and then kept adding on from there. So
Your wife's gonna say, "Oh, that one request brought all of this." A quick question though. Um, my wife will complain sometimes if I bring in new stereo equipment, speakers, whatever. She's never complained once about home automation stuff because it usually makes her life easier. Do you have a similar situation?
yeah, so like when I borked my setup, some of those keypads and stuff weren't working, or like um she likes sometimes turn the lights on with her phone. She's like, "When are you gonna get this working? When are you gonna get this working?" And I'm like, "I'm working on it." The only time that sometimes she'll get frustrated is when I'm putting in the light switch, and then she walks in the house, and then I've got a hole in the wall with wires all splayed out of it. And like there was one night I was trying to put in one in the kitchen light, and it was a two-way light, and I never messed with it. And we didn't have any lights in the kitchen for that night because I ran out of time. I couldn't figure out which wires were which ones. So we have an older
Yeah.
house with older wiring. So
Oh, do you have any Lutron devices?
I have a not like the cassetta.
Yeah, because their switches are only two wires. You don't need that neutral ground, the neutral wire. And so I would bet that there is some sort of plug-in or bridge for the cassetta hub.
Yeah, I've heard you guys talking about that, and I've been thinking about maybe getting some of those and seeing how those work. And they do have some of the Z-Wave. There's like a brand called Enovelli. They make Z-Wave switches, and
Yeah.
their switches are well, it's not two wire, but you can put, you don't have to know which one's hot and which one's your
Yeah,
line and which
same.
one's your
Yeah.
load, and you can switch them. Just put them in there and it figures it out.
Yeah,
The
that is a cool feature.
Insteon does have the two wire switches, but you have to have an incandescent bulb with those. I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
exactly sure the science of how those work, but I have all LEDs, and if you use those with an LED, it like has a really low, like it's on all the time basically. Like it's
Yeah.
really low. So I kind of got rid of
Yeah,
those.
the Lutron works well with LEDs, and they're similar to Insteon on the three-way switches. You don't actually connect that traveler wire. You
Uh-huh.
just link the remote to the main switch.
Okay.
And I was able to easily add it, and it's pretty much a false back. You just cap off the wires, and then you
Okay,
put this
nice.
remote on there, and the battery in that thing lasts 10 years.
Wow.
And when the battery does go out, it's easy to change. But that's what I have
Okay, nice.
because it's a lot easier. And what's cool is I don't have to get my voltmeter out there to see which one's hot. I just connect them up, and
Right.
I hate admitting this. I've done some of them with the with the switch hot, so you're just very careful
Right.
about not touching it.
Yeah,
I think
I may or may not do that like 9 times out of 10. So
I talked to an electrician and he said, "Yeah, oh, I've done that many times." So,
yeah,
all right. Well, Tony Willis, thank you so much for joining us. And we may get a few questions asked. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to forward them on to you.
sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.